Welcome back again. I'm so glad you're back with me. When we finished last time, I was just talking to you about Jacob's sons. This is what I'm doing now. It's Jacob's sons part 2. I usually don't like for these to go on like this because I think it's hard to keep track. However, this is important stuff, and I want to lay the foundation here for the rest of the teachings I'm going to be doing. So when we finished with the last session, we just saw, I believe it was the 8th child born, but 4 to Leah, 2 to Rachel through her handmaiden Bilhah, and 2 to Zilpah through her handmaiden, through Leah's handmaiden Zilpah. So now we're going to see, the sisters argued over the mandrakes. I've taught all this before, but what I want to do is get on down the road with the sons. So in Genesis 30:17, we see that Jacob goes to Leah, and she conceives a child, and when he is born, she names him Issachar, which means God has given me my reward for giving Zilpah to my husband. Basically, she's saying God's given me my reward because I wasn't selfish, I wasn't jealous, and I was willing to share my husband just so that we can be obedient to the word of God and multiply and be fruitful. So then Genesis 30:17-18, she has the child Issachar, and then she goes on Genesis 30:21. She has another natural child whom she names Zebulun. This is her 6th child, and that name means honor. And then she has her 7th child, a girl named Dinah. Dinah's name means justice, and Dinah is her 7th natural child. So Leah has now had 7 children, natural children, all her own. And what I wanted to talk about was the fact that 7 is God's number for perfection, and therefore justice is perfect. God's justice is perfect. So then we see in Genesis 30:22-24, we see Rachel finally gets pregnant. Well, bless her little heart. She gets pregnant. She tried for a long time. And all the antics and all the manipulation and everything, she didn't get pregnant until God okayed it. Now, I'm sure that she had tempered down some, but not a whole lot. So she gets pregnant, and she has a little boy, surprise, surprise, and she names him Joseph, which means, may God give me another, or may the Lord give me another. You would think, or at least I would think, that after all these years of begging and crying and wheedling and everything she was doing, that she would be delighted that she had a little boy, all her own, all 100% her baby. She wants another one. I understand that. So, okay. I don't want to get caught up in that. So later on, she has her last child. So now what we have, fast forwarding, I want to talk about each of these sons and what has happened in their lives as far as we know. So Reuben, the firstborn, as I said when I started off in part 1, these kids were not perfect. Okay, so they're the patriarchs of Israel, but they have to go through their own trials by fire. And I'm not talking about the god Molech. They have to figure out themselves. They have to grow up. They have to mature. Just because they're born into the lineage of Israel does not mean that they're perfect. So Reuben, the firstborn, had conjugal relations with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and that not only brought disgrace on himself, but a vile disdain toward him from his father, from Jacob. Not a smart thing to do. Simeon and Levi were a couple of hotheads. I mean, really? The 2nd and 3rd child? They were hotheads when their sister Dinah was raped by Shechem. These 2 brothers tricked Shechem and his father and their whole town, all the men, into doing circumcision so that they could, under the auspices of intermarrying. And then once the guys had done their circumcision and they're laying around healing, guess what happens? These guys ride in, Simeon and Levi, and kill all the men. It wasn't a cool move. Wasn't cool at all. So it gets Dad, Jacob, really mad at them. He's really, really angry. And then they have to leave. He makes them pack up their stuff and Not just these 2 kids, but the whole group of them move on further south. Then Judah, the 4th son. What does Judah mean? Judah means praise. Well, his name is Judah, but he's not perfect yet. So in his praise, he marries an Adulamite woman. We never know her name. I'm going to call her Sally. No offense to the Sallys out there. But he marries Sally, and they have 3 kids. And they have Onan, and Shelah. Now, okay, plug your ears if this offends you. Married Tamar, a righteous woman. He was not a righteous man. He didn't do right physically with his manliness, and God killed him. So the brother did the kinsman redeemer thing. He comes in and he marries Tamar, and he's going to have children by Tamar, but the children he has by Tamar, which is per the kinsman redeemer program, even though we don't have Torah yet, they still know the rules. Okay, so he doesn't like the fact that he's going to have a child by Tamar, and this child, his child, will inherit what would have been the older brothers. So God kills him. He wastes his seed. God kills him. All right, so here we have Tamar. She's a widow twice. And so Judah, her father-in-law, says to her, well, Shelah is just a little kid, just a little guy. So you go back to your daddy, and you sit with your daddy in your widow's weeds, and when he gets old enough, I'll give him to you. Well, he grew up, and Judah didn't do it. He didn't give the son over like he said. So Tamar hears about this, and so she goes out. In the meantime, Judah's wife dies, Sally dies, and so he does his time of mourning, and then he's going to go to the fields to check on his animals. Well, Tamar is a pretty sharp little cookie. So she figures out he's going to go to the field. He has to come this way. There's a T in the road like this, and he has to go one of 2 ways. Well, she knows where his fields are. After all, she's been a part of his family. She knows the fields are over here. So she sits at the head of the T in a costume that looks like she's a temple prostitute. Pretty sharp. So he comes along now. Remember, he's a widower now, and he's missing out on having Sally. So he goes in and he sits with her. He makes a deal with her. He wants to sleep with her. And she says, okay, so how much are you willing to offer? Well, he didn't have any money. And she said, no, we're not going down that road. So I want you to give me proof of who you are. And he said, well, I'll send money back with my servant. She said, no. I want you to give me proof. I want you, so give me something yours. So he gives her 3 things. He gives her his belt, his staff, and his seal. Duh. So he sleeps with her. He goes on to the fields. Well, lo and behold, she's pregnant by him, her father-in-law. 3 months pass. Word gets out to Judah that Tamar is pregnant, and he decides he's going to have her killed. And the way they did that was through stoning. So he says, you go get her, you bring her out, we're going to stone her. As I said, she's pretty sharp. So she comes out and she says, okay, before the stones start flying, the man who owns these 3 items, the staff, the seal, and the belt, is the father of my child. Judah gets it. He gets it. And you know what he says? He says, she's more righteous than I. Leave her alone. So then she has twins by him. And then time goes on, and those kids grow up. One of them's Perez. So because Reuben, kind of got ahead of myself here. Reuben is in trouble with his dad. You know, Reuben is the one that slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. He slept with her. Dad got mad. All this stuff happened. So Reuben is constantly looking for a way to get into Dad's good graces. And so along comes Joseph, the kid brother the favored one, because he's the child of Rachel, and he's a brat. He's a tattletale. He's a smart aleck. He's a brat. Today you'd beat the living. Well, no, you couldn't beat him because you go to jail. But anyhow, I'd spank him if he was my kid. But he goes around. He tattles on his brothers. So the brothers go off to the fields. They're adults now. They're adults. They go off to the fields. They're tending the sheep. Dad sends him out to check on the brothers. He goes out to see the brothers, and what they don't like him for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons they don't like him is because he's had these two dreams where all the brothers bow down to him, and then eventually not only the brothers but the parents bow down to him. They don't like this kid at all. So here they see Dad made him a coat of many colors. He's wearing the coat of many colors, which is very visible from a distance. This coat of many colors is important to us, and I want to talk about that in just a second. And so when they see him coming, they make a plan, and the plan was they're going to kill him, rip up his coat, make Dad think an animal did it. Well, that didn't happen. Judah talks them into not killing him, but to throwing him into a pit. Now Reuben doesn't, actually it was Reuben who talked him into not killing him and throwing him into a pit, because he had the idea that he was going to come back later and get him out of the pit, take him back to Daddy, and get himself reestablished as a good guy with Dad. Didn't happen. So it was Judah who was there then. We don't know where Reuben went, but he was obviously absent when they brought Joseph up out of the pit. Reuben is gone. We don't know where he is, but he's not there because he doesn't know this happened. So along comes a caravan. They sell Joseph to the caravan, to the slave traders, as to be a slave. They don't care. They didn't like him anyway. Just get him out of here. And so he goes off with the caravan. They take his coat, rip it up in shreds, and dip it in blood. And then Reuben comes back. He has a fit. He doesn't know this. He thinks they've killed him. And so he's very upset over it. Anyhow, they give Dad the coat. Dad is highly grieved and stays grieved. And there is nothing that they can do to bring peace to Dad. He's really upset over it. And so now fast forward to Judah out with Tamar. He understands grief. He has seen his father grieve. He's lost these two sons, and he's really feeling guilty over what he did. He feels guilty, and yet he can't tell his dad. They have no idea where Joseph is. None at all. So, the cloak of many colors. Now, why is that important? Even then, these colors were significant. So we have here eventually 12 brothers. Benjamin hasn't been born yet. We have 12 brothers. I guess we do have Benjamin. Yeah, because Joseph knows about Benjamin. Sorry about that. We have 12 brothers. They all have the same family name. They all probably look a lot alike, everything. So we have to have something to distinguish each brother. And I believe each brother had a color. So like Reuben's was red, Levi's was blood red, Simeon's was yellow, Judah's was green, and go on. I have a whole thing worked out on all this stuff. And so the brothers related to these colors. They had their little banners that said, this is my color, that kind of thing, like children would do growing up. And then as men, as adults, these became their addresses, if you will, their colors. So when here comes Joseph, the kid brother, with his cloak of many colors on, not only did it just make him furious, but one of the reasons it made him furious because it was made like a royal robe, and the colors in it were their colors. It was like a patchwork quilt, and in it were their colors. No, they didn't like this, and they were so angry over it, and they were mad at their dad, but they were really mad at this little tattletale kid brother who was walking around in this coat of many colors. And so that was what that was all about. I believe when they dipped that coat, this is my little prophetic thing here, I believe when they dipped that coat in the blood, that they prophesied Israel's history, future history. So anyhow, they do all this deed. Now, as time goes on, they go to Egypt. When they get to Egypt, you know the story there. They have to go down to Egypt because they're out of food. There's a famine in the land. They don't know about Joseph. They don't know that Joseph was sold to Pharaoh's top man. They don't know he's in Egypt. They don't know anything about him. You know the whole story, how he could translate dreams and all this other stuff. So he becomes a second in command to Joseph. And we know the story of the 7 good years and the 7 lean years, and how he bought up all this food and everything and stored it away. He was a prepper, if you will. He was preparing for what was coming because he had the vision. God had shown him what was coming. So now here he is, and he has the storehouses of food. Canaan is also suffering from the famine, just as Egypt is. So Dad sends the brothers to Egypt. He doesn't send all 11. He sends 10 of them to Egypt to get food. They go down there. They don't recognize Joseph. I mean, he's about probably the furthest thing away from their mind, except for the guilt factor that they all suffer from. He looks like an Egyptian. He's clothed like an Egyptian. His hair's cut like an Egyptian. He walks and talks like an Egyptian. Speaking the language. They have no idea who he is. None. So he sees them and immediately recognizes them. But they're clueless as to who he is. And so he begins to set them up. He's playing with them, basically. He wants to see where they are now, who they are. He remembers what happened to him, but he wants to see what's going to happen now. So he accuses them of spying. I said, no, we're not spies. He said, yeah, you are. You came down here to spy out the land. You came down here to spy out the land to take what we have. And so he throws them all in jail. Well, they're in jail for 3 days. And then he wants to go down. He gets them out, and he says, all right, this is how it is. He had already asked them about things in Canaan, about who they were, what their heritage was, about their family situation. And so they said that they were one time they were 12 brothers. Now they were 11, although there were just 10 of them down there because the youngest one was still at home with his dad. Dad is old. He couldn't stand it if something happened to the youngest one. And on and on and on and on they went. We're not spies. Joseph kept saying, yeah, you're spies. Of course, he's speaking to them in the Egyptian with a translator, I'm sure. And so this goes back and forth. Finally, after 3 days, he lets them out of prison. He says to them, all right, this is what's going to happen. One of you go back to Canaan, get your brother and bring him down here, and I'll let you all go. That will prove to me you're not spies. He said, no, we can't do that. We can't bring our brother back. And so he said, all right, then 9 of you go. 1 stay here. And the one that was held behind was Simeon. Now, this tells me that Simeon was somewhat verbally wound up over throwing Joseph into that pit and in selling Joseph into slavery. There was a reason. Scripture doesn't tell us what it is, but there was a reason that Simeon was held back by Joseph. So, 9 brothers leave. All right, they go back. They're terribly frightened at what just happened in Egypt. They're just terrified by it. And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do when they get home to Dad. And Dad sees one of his sons is missing. How are they going to explain this to him? Judah, oh my goodness, Judah, having lost his own 2 sons, understands this grief that his dad is going through. And here he is, his dad's going to be grieved again over the loss of another son. And he's like, blah, 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 blah. So he decides, they go back, they tell Dad what happened. Well, then when they opened their feed sacks, all the money that they had paid the Egyptians had been put back in the feed sacks. Now they're scared. What are they going to do? They're going to really think that we are spies. They're really going to think that we did all this intentionally. Oh my gosh, we didn't take the money. How did the money get back in? Blah, blah, blah. Time goes on. They run out of food. They need to go back to Egypt. Dad says, you're not taking the kid. They said, if we don't take the kid, don't take Benjamin, we can't go back to Egypt because he won't let us have any food. If we want Simeon out of jail, we've got to take Benjamin back. And finally the dad sees, and it's Judah who makes a difference. Now Reuben said, well, of course, Reuben's still trying to ingratiate himself with his dad. He just can't get over this, or the shame of what he did. I mean, it was a bad thing he did. It was really bad. Very bad. So he's trying to ingratiate himself. And so in his brilliancy, he says to his dad, okay, this is how it is. We'll go down to Judah, or go down to Egypt, and we'll take Benjamin. And we'll go down and we'll get Simeon and we'll get the food and we'll come back. But if something goes wrong and we don't come back with Benjamin and Simeon and all of us, then you can kill my kids. Well, wasn't that just brilliant? Just brilliant. What grandparent is going to kill their grandchild? And certainly, Jacob is not going to kill his grandchildren. And I'm sure Jacob just said, no, I don't trust you, Reuben. I didn't trust you then. I don't trust you now. So he said, no. Well, so Judah comes up. Here comes Judah. And he's kind of has the pulse, his fingers on the pulse of this situation. So he says to his dad, all right, I'll be responsible. We have to go back down to Egypt. Had you not have delayed us, we could have been down there and back twice by now. We have to do this. And we have to take Benjamin with us. If anything happens to Benjamin, it will be on my shoulders. I will bear the shame of this the rest of my life. And you know it as well as I do. He didn't say, kill my kids. He didn't say anything. He just said, Dad, hey, this is the truth. This is how it's going to go down. So they go, Dad finally says, okay, I'm grieved. Going down. We've got to get the food. And then when we go down there, this time, everything changes. Chapter 43 of Genesis, we see Judah takes the lead in Egypt. He finally throws off the cords of despair and steps up the plate. And we see where he reminds his father, and then he goes down to Egypt, and then he reminds Joseph. It was very important to him that he restore his brother, both brothers, to the father, because he now understood grief. I think you can visualize what happens. When they get down there, Joseph comes out. He deals with them again, and then he has food with them. He has them come to his house and eat. They sit down at the table, and this is so fun. I mean, Joseph is playing with them. So he lines them up, birth order. Boom, 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 boom. They're all adults. There's no like 5-year-olds and 40-year-olds. They're all adults now. So he lines them up, birth order at the table. And when they sit down to eat, so here you have Joseph, and you have the brothers, and you have the Egyptians, and they eat this wonderful meal. And then he's going to let them have their food that they came to buy, the grain. And then he says, blah, blah, blah to them, and then they leave. Well, what they don't know is that Joseph's chief steward, at Joseph's behest, takes Joseph's personal cup, it's his divination cup, and puts it into the sack of Benjamin. And so the guys go off with the food, da-da-da-da-da-da. We got out of Dodge, we're all alive, Dad's going to be glad, blah, blah, blah. They get out of Egypt just a short distance, and they get stopped by the Egyptian army, and all of their bags searched, and there on the last bag, which is Benjamin's bag, is the cup. And now they all have to go back. They're gone. The army is just going to take Benjamin back, but they all said, no, we're all going back. We've got to settle this thing. We didn't take it. We don't know how it got in here. They professed their innocence. They go back down there, and this is where everything begins to happen. So they go in and they're talking to Joseph, and they're saying, actually they're not talking to him one-on-one, they're talking to him through a translator, and they're saying, we didn't do it, blah, blah, blah. And when it comes out, finally, when Judah steps up to the bat and he takes the authority on himself, he takes responsibility on himself, and he begins to plead the case. Judah means praise. Judah's color, I believe, is green, emerald green, which will be important later on. And so when he begins to praise the Joseph, who now has the power and the authority of God as far as these guys are concerned, because he could wipe them out just like that. When Judah begins to take responsibility, Joseph sees how much Judah has changed, but it's not just Judah, all the brothers have changed. They have been brought down by what they did. Their guilt has really ridden on them. And so this causes Joseph, who is, as I said, like God, to reveal himself. Next 17 verses of Genesis are very powerful. This is where Judah pleads their case. He is offering himself to be a slave in place of Benjamin. They said no. And finally, Joseph couldn't control himself any longer. In Genesis 45, verses 1 through 3, he reveals himself, and there's all this family reunion. The point being, it is praise, Judah, praise, that made God, in this case Joseph, reveal his true personality, his true nature. Now that's going to be very important to us as we get into the next teaching, which is on the desert habitat. And so I'm going to end it here. I'm glad you were here today. Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.